This year's Stephen Coons Award goes to Dr. Lance Williams. It's a great honor for me. Lance has been a friend and colleague for almost 30 years now, although the fact that it's 30 is kind of scary. Like many pioneers, Lance began his career at the computer graphics at the University of Utah in the early 70s. Unlike many others, he joined the computer science program holding a degree in English from Kansas University. Even so, he quickly established himself at Utah as one of the leading thinkers there. And having, participating with Lance at the time, Lance was known for the person who could come in with the very interesting way of looking at things out from left field, which really brought a lot of energy and insight into the field. He always discussed ideas with others. He was actively engaged with others. He was stimulating and creative. After working on 2D and 3D animation systems, Lance left Utah to join NYIT in 1974. During that time, many of his fundamental technical contributions appeared: mipmapping, shadow buffers, spatial animation by image warping, and new techniques for anti-aliasing. In 1987, Lance joined Apple's ATG research group, where his accomplishments included work with Eric Chen that marks the beginning of image-based rendering, as well as fundamental contributions to motion capture and animation systems. In 1997, Lance joined DreamWorks, and today works at Walt Disney Animation Studios. Lance's career has found him at many important centers of computer graphics. In each, he has acted as an unforgettable creative force to help catapult the institution to prominence. His technical contributions are always marked by fresh thinking and extreme creativity. However, his contributions to these institutions goes much deeper. Everyone who has been privileged to work with Lance, and there are many, remarks on how he has touched them. Lance is famous not only for his vision, but also for his teaching, and for his inspiration and generosity to others. For many, Lance is one of the unsung heroes of our field. Through his ideas, his artistry, and his humanity, Lance has made a lasting impression on computer graphics, both as a discipline and as a community. We are proud to award the Coons Award to Lance Williams.
Thank you. I'm so fortunate to be standing here, and so grateful. And I'd like to begin by expressing my gratitude. First, to my mother, Joanne Williams, who got me to eat broccoli by telling me to pretend I was a dinosaur eating trees, and taught me that it's better to invent a carpet that eats dirt than a robot to vacuum it. And to my late father, Skipper Williams, who encouraged me in every way and flew me to the National Science Fair in 1967. Then I'd like to thank my mentors at the University of Kansas, my art teacher, Norman G., my writing professor, James Gunn, a noted science fiction author who took my good friend, his son Kit, and I to the World Science Fiction Convention in St. Louis in 1969, where I was first exposed to computer animation in the films of John Whitney Sr. and John Whitney Jr. Did I say science fiction? Judging from the electronic theater, computer graphics is a science fiction medium, and I say it without apology. Jim Blynn's thesis is punctuated with quotations from science fiction stories. What fills our imaginations in childhood may provide direction for our entire lives. Often the inspiration precedes the science, as Jules Verne and H.G. Wells preceded Robert Goddard and Willy Ley. There are those who believe that Walt Disney programmed John Kennedy to put a man on the moon. It's wrong to underestimate the power of fiction. and fantasy. When I arrived at the University of Utah, I basked in the inspiration provided by the faculty there. Dave Evans, Ivan Sutherland, Tom Stockham, Stephen Coons. I may be the last recipient of this award to have known Steve Coons. He was unique, a remarkable and insightful man who connected classical engineering graphics through linear algebra to the new technologies of computer display and pioneered mathematical representation of surfaces for engineering. I should say that I actually learned most of what I know about surfaces and about Steve Coons' work from my mentor, Ed Catmull, and from my extraordinarily patient thesis advisor, Rich Riesenfeld. Last year, to the universal astonishment of the small number of people aware of it, I completed my graduate study at the University of Utah. And of course, I'd like to thank Rich Riesenfeld and the members of my committee, but I owe a very special debt to my longtime colleague, Robert McDermott. I'd like to thank him now. My primary education may have been as much from my fellow graduate students as from the professors. I'm talking about people like Ed Catmull, Fred Park, Jim Clark, Wee Chuang Fong, Robert McDermott, Martin Newell, Garland Stern, Jerry Evans, Larry Evans, and Jim Kajia. I wish somehow I could convey the excitement of those early days in computer graphics, when a group of students from all over the world began to explore a new and different one. A number of us wound up at the New York Institute of Technology with Albie Ray Smith and Ephraim Cohen, where the plot thickened. Let's take a stroll down memory lane and have a look at some of the early computer animation that we worked on. The author of that piece, Ed Emschwiller, was a prominent science fiction illustrator who went on to become Dean of Film at California Institute of the Arts. After our visit with the past, which I'm exploring with you now, we can devote some thought, now that the millennium has arrived, to the future of computer graphics, for which I'll offer a modest proposal. The next piece of animation I'm going to show you has haunted me for almost 20 years now. It's evidence of our attempt at NYIT to make the first computer-animated feature film. I'd like to thank New York Institute of Technology for pioneering in this area, for making this work possible. I'd like to apologize to them and to my audience today, and to Ned Green in particular, that I have only a half-inch dub of this animation.
Now 99. Microfeed.
What are your levels 2 and 4?
Exchange 2 for 1. There's the best place. We're coming home.
Hello, humans! This is what you've been waiting for!
DynaDigiDataVac, an entertainment subcompany of DynaDigiDataVac, an entertainment subcompany of PanTranscorp presents 3DV.
Hello, I'm Dot Matrix. What you are about to see will change your indoor life forever.
Amazing. Hi, everyone. I'm user-friendly, and this is 3DV, the first fully automated, computer-controlled, interactive, all-robot network programming system.
I'm glad that was your line. But he's absolutely right, of course. This is the first computer-generated TV show, and I guess you know that that means the future is finally here.
Right, Doc. And we're here to introduce you to a wonderful new age in the history of television.
Stay with us. We'll be right back to take you on the grand tour.
Coming soon on DynaDigiDataVac's 3DV, another fine computer-generated feature presentation, filmed as it actually happened.
2,000 years after the end of the world, one human being holds the key to a robot planet gone mad. Survives to reign over an army of robots. Imagine the works. Critics have said, very likely the best film of 1992. You be the judge, but see the works before the works sees you.
Coming soon to a Videodrome, Cassettier, Disc Shop, or 3DV Sensormatic near you.
To provide some historical context for the works, it's worth mentioning that computers today run approximately 10,000 times as fast as they did back then. The last piece I'm going to show you this morning is titled Interface. It was the last piece of animation I worked on at NYIT with Paul Alexander Jr. and Carter Burwell. It has a valedictory character, so I believe I'll save it for the end of the talk. It's instructive to compare these primitive efforts to what you've seen or are going to see in the electronic theater. There, we've seen monsters and fabulous creatures, cataclysms, spectacles, glowing and gleaming messages hanging in space, virtual actors, living corpses, people melting into water, a suspension of the natural order. To what significance? What does it mean? Where is it going? Personally, I see a line leading from a storyteller sitting around a campfire to an actor performing a role on a stage, to a cameraman zooming in on the eyes of an actor on a motion picture screen. And what is the direction of this thread? Toward the mind. Suddenly, sound and images can jump cut from one character to another, from one continent to another, from one century to the next, in the blink of an eye. This doesn't resemble any real form of transportation. It resembles thought. The mind's eye is the theme of Sunstone. It's been a recurring theme in my reminiscences here. What goes on in this mind's eye? Storytelling is about entertainment, right? How can it be about thought, about human minds? What grip we maintain on the world is through stories, and our brains are busy turning our relations with the world and with others into stories, just as our visual systems are busy turning the world and our relations with it into cartoons. I'd like to speculate about where the direction of this thread will lead us next, but before we get to the good stuff, I think I should say something about the social context of computer graphics. Say a few words about politics, since it's something that scientists and engineers often neglect. And perhaps the most important lesson of science fiction is that scientists have social responsibility. Those of us involved in computer graphics can consider ourselves engaged in intellectual property issues, since we deal with software patents, business method patents, open source software development, and intellectual property issues relating to media, which we regularly process. We're vendors, users, and gatekeepers of intellectual property, and that puts us in a pivotal position. On May 7th, Reed Elsevier was authorized by America's antitrust authorities to buy Harcourt General for $4.5 billion, adding another 500 journals to its stable of 1,200 academic publications. The technical publication market is estimated to be $10 billion. I'm relying on my figures for this talk on an Economist article of May 12th, which said that Elsevier's technical publications had margins of about 35% compared to 20% for their publications overall. So there's a tremendous concentration of power in the hands of a few publishers over the technical community. Between 1986 and 1999, the average cost of annual subscriptions to academic journals went up 207%. Brain Research, about which more later, is one title for which the subscription is $17,444 a year. Naturally, it's institutions that pay these subscriptions. We're right now witness to a political struggle in this arena. A group called the Public Library of Science is urging scientists to boycott any publisher that does not relinquish the rights to publish biomedical papers after 6 months. Others urge immediate posting of their papers on the internet. I have no immediate position on these issues that I'm trying to tendentiously sway you toward, but because of our involvement with these issues, I think it's very important that we consider them. Particularly in the near term, our efforts in stylized depiction, what some people call non-photorealistic rendering, which has to do with the automatic redepiction of images, is probably an excellent method to surmount digital watermarking schemes. And work that is going on in the SIGGRAPH community today will lead to the appropriation not of literal abduction of material, but the abduction of gestures, styles, and manners across media, leading a tremendous expansion or diffusion of the term derivative work. And this will bring up issues, just as biotechnology is bringing up issues in medicine, for which our legal framework is ill-prepared. So I encourage you all to be attentive to the pub policy link at SIGGRAPH.org. I'm going to end my talk with a modest proposal for the future. Danny Hillis will talk about the future. I'm talking about something rather shorter term. I think that we can knock this hack off in maybe the next 40 years. I'll now propose a grand challenge to the discipline of computer graphics. The areas of research I'm proposing have far-reaching consequence, particularly in the field of communication. They are opportunities offered by two developments in our understanding of the human brain: fast imaging of brain activity and increasingly detailed knowledge of multiple physical spatial maps of the visual field within the brain. The University of Utah, which drew researchers in computer graphics from around the world in the 1970s, is also a center of research in artificial organs, perhaps most famous for the Jarvik heart. A number of computer graphics graduate students took part-time employment with William Dobell's Artificial Eye Project. This ambitious research effort worked with fine meshes of electrodes on the surface of the brains of blind human volunteers. Stimulating points on the mesh would stimulate phosphines, appearing to the patient as spots of light in the visual field. A computer program, one is tempted to say an interactive computer graphics program for a special purpose display, was written to map the subjective location of phosphine events. After establishing the mesh points, which elicit visible spots, a minimal number of pairwise presentations of phosphines were made to the subject, who selected the spatial relationship of the second to the first on a telephone touchpad. These relationships defined a mapping of active mesh points to an internal image. The project was successful in mapping simple, low-resolution images to the visual cortex in the brains of blind subjects, and some were able to read, one letter at a time. There's an innate complementarity between Dobell's artificial eye and Sutherland's head-mounted display. Both projects attempted to create a sort of instrumental vision. Both were also visionary projects, now as then, well ahead of ordinary medical or engineering practice. A significant trend in our current understanding of the brain is the development of fast imaging techniques for tracking physical concomitants of brain activity. As these methods improve in speed, resolution, and the range of physical properties measured, they can be applied to examining the activity of the brain's internal maps of the visual field. Last November, Nancy Conwisher of MIT and Kathleen O'Craven of the Rotman Research Institute in Toronto reported the ability to read patients' minds with functional MRI to the extent that they were able to tell in 85% of the cases, using their good subjects, whether the subject was thinking of a place or a person's face. And they moreover established in these fMRI studies that the same brain areas used to process real visual images were utilized to invoke these mental apparitions. This is a grand challenge for the discipline of computer graphics because image synthesis from spatial maps of visual properties is a high-level description of what computer graphics is. It is also appropriate for computer graphics, which is in the incidental business of posing and employing means of describing objects and images, to pursue understanding of the means employed by human minds. This is arguably a high-level description of the human interface problem in the realm of graphic display. Finally, the practical resolution of many issues in the display of mental images, or indeed visualization of other mental events, involves sampling, projection, deformation, mapping, integration, and modeling of images, surfaces, and volumes. These are the classical working set of graphicists, lately augmented by transport and dynamics. All of this amounts to an explicit instrumental embodiment of our state of understanding of the visual system and the brain's visual pathways. But there are deeper fish, for these pathways in this system are not necessarily idle when the eyes are closed. We share some such thoughts as can be framed in words. The rest are lost, but to the artist's hand. Picasso once said, "It would be very interesting to preserve photographically the metamorphosis of a picture. Possibly one might then discover the path followed by the brain in materializing a dream." Now we have the resource to pursue such a path in reality. In conclusion, I'd like to thank my lovely wife, Amber Denker, and my beautiful children, Maine and Zephram. I'd like to thank you all. When I was a boy, my hometown had about 35,000 people. SIGGRAPH has 40,000 this year, and in some ways, This is my community now. I thank you all and remind you that the big screen is behind the eyes.
Thank you, Lance. It is my great pleasure this morning to welcome Danny Hillis, our SIGGRAPH 2001 keynote speaker. An inventor, scientist, and computer designer, Danny Hillis is currently Chief Technology Officer and Chairman of Applied Minds, which was recently founded as a research and development company, creating a range of new products and services in software, entertainment, electronics, biotechnology, and mechanical design. Previously, Danny was Vice President of Research and Development for Walt Disney Imagineering and was named the first Disney Fellow in 1996. At Disney, he developed new technologies and business strategies for theme parks, television, motion pictures, the internet, and consumer product businesses. Danny pioneered the concept of parallel computers that is now the basis for most supercomputers, as well as the RAID disk array technology used to store large databases. In 1983, he co-founded Thinking Machines, which was the first company to build and market such systems successfully. He holds over 40 U.S. patents covering parallel computers, disk arrays, forgery prevention methods, and various electronic and mechanical devices. Danny also designed a 10,000-year mechanical clock. Born in Baltimore, Maryland, Danny spent much of his childhood living overseas in Europe, Africa, and Asia. He attended MIT and received his Bachelor's of Science degree in mathematics in 1978. As a graduate student at the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab, Danny designed tendon-controlled robot arms and touch-sensitive robot skin. A computer composed entirely of Tinker Toys that he built is on display at the Boston Computer Museum. Danny has published scientific papers in journals such as Science, Nature, Modern Biology, and the Communications of the ACM. He recently published his second book, The Pattern on the Stone, in which he explains the basics of how computers work. Danny is the recipient of numerous awards, including the Hopper Award for his contributions to computer science and the Spirit of American Creativity Award for his inventions. He is a fellow of the ACM and a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Please welcome Danny Hillis.
Thank you. Good morning. The first talk that I ever got to give in a big convention center like this was sometime in the early 70s in the Hilton Hotel in New York City. And I was an undergraduate at that time, and I had my overhead projector slides. And they were some graphs of kind of exponential curves. And they were basically predictions of looking at the manufacturing capacity of microprocessors, which was mostly at Intel at the time. It had just come out with the 4004. And kind of projecting them in the future and looking at what was going to happen. And one of the predictions that I made from these graphs was that soon in the United States there would be more microprocessors than there were people. And at that time, the entire audience laughed. It was a very funny concept. And in fact, afterwards in the question and answer session, I kind of smart aleck in the audience asked a question and said, well, what do you think people are going to do with all these microprocessors? I mean, it's not as if you need a microprocessor in every doorknob. But I am happy to report that if you go back to the Hilton Hotel in New York City today, there is, in fact, a microprocessor in every doorknob. Now, the reason that I start out